Chapter 1395. The moment the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle attacked, Chu Xiu knew that he was a completely different person from the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle in his memory. When he first saw that illusion, the Kunlun devil cult had yet to unify the martial world. It should be in the early stages, so Duga Weiwei might not have reached the level where he could beat the entire Daoyu Ocean. However, the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle was definitely not a martial immortal. He should only be at the peak of heaven and earth elemental enlightenment. However, looking at the power of his slash, he should have the strength of a level 3 or level 4 martial immortal. Facing the mountain crumble of the 7 limits, Chu Xiu also slashed. One slash, devouring the heavens. The powerful force of the blade instantly enveloped the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle. The huge black hole even devoured the energy in the dragon vein space. Although devouring the heavens could not completely devour the energy due to the dragon vein, it created a huge vortex of energy in the surroundings. When the two blades collided, the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle was sent flying. The green dragon crescent blade in his hand was completely shattered. When it came to blade techniques, his mountain crumble was not as good as Chu Xiu's devouring the heavens. When it came to weapons, the green dragon crescent blade in his hand was not as good as the formation breaking technique. When it came to strength, Chu Xiu could already face Yan Mo, who was at the peak of level 8, let alone someone who was only at level 3 or level 4. When the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle met Chu Xiu, he could only be beaten up. Therefore, after this slash, Chu Xiu did not attack again. He only asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Are you the Lord of Iron Emperor Castle from 500 years ago?" The Lord of Iron Emperor Castle did not speak. The blood-red killing intent in his eyes intensified. He drew out the dragon courage spear on his back and stabbed forward, stirring up the power of mountains and rivers. Stubborn fool. Chu Xiu snorted coldly. When the misty slash landed, the formless blade intent directly tore the spear apart. However, the Lord of the Iron Emperor Castle was very persistent. In the blink of an eye, he took out a phoenix feather gold-plated drum and swept it towards Chu Xiu with boundless sharpness. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. Why does this guy seem to have no brains? Forming hand seals, 6 Saha Splendor wheels appeared and directly trapped the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master. At the same time, the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet in Chu Xiu's hand trembled. He wanted to pull his Yuan Shen into the illusion of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation, to see what exactly the other party was. However, Chu Xiu was surprised to find that the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet had no reaction at all. The 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet's attacks on the soul were abnormally direct. If your soul wasn't strong enough, or if your power wasn't steady enough, you would be pulled into the 6 Paths of Reincarnation. However, if the opponent was strong and had a steady soul, the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet would also cause a certain amount of pulling force to interfere with the opponent's battle. In short, there would be some feedback. However, Chu Xiu couldn't feel any feedback from the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master. It was as if the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master was made of stone. This scene was very unreasonable. The person before him was so strong, comparable to a 3rd or 4th heaven martial immortal. How could he not have a Yuan Shen? Within the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet, 6 different powers kept bombarding the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master. However, the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master did not have any intention of surrendering. He continued to attack madly. Chu Xiu snorted coldly. With the holy demon indestructible body on his body, he took a step forward and arrived in front of the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master. He punched out. Golden Buddhist light mixed with pitch-black demonic aura blasted the Iron Emperor Fort Master away. However, at the same time, Chu Xiu pulled his hands horizontally. The powerful force immediately shattered the Iron Emperor Fort Master's golden armor, revealing a horrifying body. The Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master was extremely pale. There were dense cracks on his body as if he had been dismembered, and then stitched back together. The joints were connected by bone spurs. The Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master looked like a middle-aged man with a big beard. However, he was expressionless. Only his eyes were filled with blood-red murderous intent. He pounced at Chu Xiu again and again. Chu Xiu used the law phenomenon and pressed the Iron Emperor Fort's Fort Master to the edge of the space. he said coldly. Speak, who are you? However, after struggling, the Iron Emperor Fort Master's lifeless face twitched slightly. The red murderous intent in his eyes dimmed. He forced a strange and twisted smile on his zombie-like face. He said in a voice that sounded like sand and stones grinding against each other. He's coming back. All of you are going to die. All of you will die. As soon as he finished speaking, the body of the Iron Emperor Castle's Fort Master instantly disintegrated into ashes that floated in the air. Chu Xiu was stunned. He didn't even feel any energy wave before the Iron Emperor Fort Master suddenly turned into ashes. This gave Chu Xiu the feeling that he was fighting an illusion. The bone sword that was nailed to the dragon vene's tail also turned into ashes. At the same time, the space door disappeared. Chu Xiu frowned as he walked out of the Yuanqi space. LV Longguang was scared out of his wits. He even had some lingering fear. This was the secret place of the Eastern Qi royal family, where countless trump cards of the Eastern Qi royal family were kept. Now, someone suddenly appeared here with such powerful strength. Just thinking about it terrified him. At the same time, LV Longguang was glad that he decided to cling to Chu Xiu. That was why he revealed this place to Chu Xiu and discovered this person in advance. Otherwise, if the other Eastern Qi royal family members entered, they would definitely not be able to defeat that strange person. That strange person was able to exchange so many blows with Chu Xiu. He must be a martial immortal. Cult Master Chu, that person just now. What is he? LV Longguang asked carefully. Chu Xiu frowned and said, if I'm not mistaken, he should be the Iron Emperor Fort Master who was destroyed by the Kunlun Devil cult 500 years ago. LV Longguang was stunned. 500 years ago? A dead person? Cult Master Chu, are you joking? Chu Xiu looked at him expressionlessly. Do I look like I'm joking? Oh, you said that there is no record of this person in the books of your Eastern Qi royal family? LV Longguang shook his head. No, absolutely not. What about the books of the Jiang dynasty royal family? There is none. The books of our Eastern Qi royal family were written based on the books of the Jiang dynasty royal family. We just changed the name. How many years ago was the last time someone from your Eastern Qi royal family entered it? LV Longguang thought for a while and said, it should be more than 100 years. There was definitely no such person back then. Chu Xiu rubbed his head and felt a slight headache. A person who had died 500 years ago reappeared here. If it was someone else, Chu Xiu might not have suspected anything. But he was the Iron Emperor Fort Master, and he even said that he had returned. It was easy for Chu Xiu to associate it with Dugu Weiwei and Dugu Weiwei in the Yellow Springs Heaven. At that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He said to LV Longguang, seal this place for now. No one is allowed to enter. LV Longguang wanted to ask something, but Chu Xiu took a step forward and disappeared in front of him almost instantly. Using the power of rules, Chu Xiu rode the wind and walked in the air. He didn't stop for rest. In less than 5 days he had returned from Great Liang City in Eastern Qi to Yanjing City. After arriving at Yanjing City, Chu Xiu went straight to the Imperial Palace to look for Xiang Li. The entire northern Yan Imperial Palace was almost unimpeded by Chu Xiu. This was also under Xiang Li's instructions. Recently, Xiang Li had been very relaxed. Chu Xiu had changed the rules of the northern Yan. Even the Daoyuotian martial artists didn't dare to cause trouble. Therefore, he didn't have to live in fear every day. Coincidentally, he had nothing better to do. Since he had nothing to do, he flipped through the signs in the palace, thinking about which concubine he should pamper. He wasn't envious of his father who had founded the Northern Yan Empire. At his peak he was even on par with Eastern Qi. Instead, he was envious of the Eastern Qi's Lu Haochang. His father had been scheming and scheming his entire life. He had long gone to the underworld. On the other hand, Lu Haochang had lived a life of pleasure, and slept with women all his life. He had lived to almost 100 years old. A fatuous ruler was a fatuous ruler. As an emperor, happiness was the most important thing. However, before he could make his choice, Chu Xiu had already appeared in the Great Hall. He stirred up a breeze, and Xiang Li was instantly scared out of his wits. Cult Master Chu, why are you? Without waiting for him to finish, Chu Xiu said, Bring me to the dragon vein of northern Yen to have a look. Xiangli was shocked. The dragon vein was related to the future of the entire northern Yen. It was of utmost importance. Xiangli quickly asked, Cult Master Chu, why do you want to go to the dragon vein? Chu Xiu frowned. Why? You don't allow it? Xiangli quickly said, Of course. I'll bring you there right now. Xiangli knew that the entire northern Yen was given to him by Chu Xiu. Without Chu Xiu, the northern Yen would still be the northern Yen, but the authority of the northern Yen imperial court would be non-existent. Chu Xiu and the Kunlun devil cult behind him were what allowed Xiangli to be a fatuous ruler. So, as long as Chu Xiu didn't want to replace the Xiang clan, everything was fine. Xiangli brought Chu Xiu to the back of the mountain, passed through the imperial mausoleum, and walked to the deepest part. He pointed to the underground palace and said, Cult Master Chu, below this palace is the dragon vein. The northern Yan's dragon vein was not like the one in eastern Qi that could directly absorb energy, so they didn't open a cave here. They only left an underground palace for the imperial family to cultivate or forge weapons with the energy of the dragon vein. Is there anything in the northern Yan's dragon vein? Xiangli quickly shook his head. The dragon vein is very important. Who would dare put anything in it? It will affect the feng shui. Chu Xiu nodded and smashed the underground palace with a punch. Under Xiangli's dumbfounded gaze, he stepped into the dragon vein. The northern Yan's dragon vein was very similar to eastern Qi's, but it was smaller than eastern Qi's. But now, the scene was exactly the same as eastern Qi's. A warrior in silver armor stood beside the dragon vein, his bone sword nailed to the tail of the dragon vein, channeling the energy into a spatial door. Chapter 1396. The moment he saw the northern Yen dragon vein, Chu Xiu was certain that someone was indeed extracting the power of the dragon vein from the three countries. Who are you? Are you also a martialist from 500 years ago? Did Dugu Weiwei bring you out? Chu Xiu could not think of any other way for a martialist from 500 years ago to be resurrected, apart from the Yellow Springs heaven, which was said to be filled with vengeful spirits. However, this time, the martialist in silver armor was like the lord of the Iron Emperor Castle. It was as if there was no way to communicate with him, and he immediately attacked. A silver-white spear appeared in his hand. As it smashed down, everything in its path was completely frozen. Even the power of laws was frozen. This martialist was even weaker than the lord of the Iron Emperor Castle. He only had the strength of a second heaven martial immortal. This time, Chu Xiu did not waste any words. He immediately used the law embodiment of heaven and earth and smashed the spear in his hand with a punch. However, the martialist's eyes shone with a cold light. It went straight for Chu Xiu's eyes, and even his primordial spirit felt threatened. Chu Xiu raised his brows. He knew the other party's identity, the icy soul divine eyes. This person should be the lord of the northern snowflake city from 500 years ago. With a wave of the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, a golden light completely destroyed the icy soul divine light. Seeing that Chu Xiu's law embodiment of heaven and earth was about to grab him, the lord of the northern snowflake city from 500 years ago revealed a strange smile. Without saying a word, his body turned into ashes and scattered between heaven and earth. Chu Xiu was taken aback. He hurriedly turned his gaze in the direction of the bone sword. However, the bone sword disappeared at the same time as the lord of the northern snowflake city. The gate that was absorbing the power of the dragon vein also disappeared. Chu Xiu's expression was a little gloomy. Too slow, too slow. These resurrected martialists from 500 years ago were not completely unconscious. At the very least, they could choose when they were going to die. But it didn't matter, there was still another place, and that was West Chu. Stepping out of the dragon vein, Xiangli, who was outside, was already scared out of his wits. In fact, he was even more scared than LV Longguang. After all, ever since the establishment of the Northern Yan nation, no one had ever dared to open up the dragon vein. How did this person manage to enter it? Xiangli had too many questions, but before he could speak, Chu Xiu said, "Send people to seal off this place. No one is allowed to come in for the time being." After that, Chu Xiu left without giving Xiangli a chance to ask any more questions. In the West Chu Imperial Palace, Meng Yunqing was discussing with the old celestial master about the many Daoyuotian martial artists that had descended to the lower realm. Among the 3 countries in the lower domain, Eastern Qi had the 2 top sects in the western region, and the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy. Now that the Kunlun Devil cult had intervened, it could be said that the situation seemed chaotic, but it was actually stable. The Northern Yen relied on Chu Xiu to make an example out of the Northern Yen. With a strong attitude, he formulated the rules of the Northern Yen nation, so the Northern Yen nation was also very stable. There was only West Chu. Many Daoyuotian rogue cultivators and sects had settled here, which had caused a lot of trouble. Meng Yunqing frowned and said, "Old Celestial Master, I heard that you have already dealt with the 3 Pure Temple's Taoist leaders. What does the 3 Pure Temple want?" The Celestial Master Mansion was the state religion of West Chu. And of course, the moon-worshipping cult was the same. Therefore Meng Yunqing trusted the old Celestial Master very much, just like how Xiangli trusted Chu Xiu. The old Celestial Master smiled bitterly and said, "What else can it mean? It means that I don't care about anything and it depends on my mood. This old man's cultivation is at the top in the lower realm, but it's nothing in the 3 Pure Temple. There are some young people there who are stronger than me. Therefore, Your Highness, don't count on the 3 Pure Temple. The 3 Pure Temple only cares about their own interests when they settle in West Chu. They won't care about the interests of others, and they can't care about them." Meng Yunqing sighed and said, "Old Celestial Master, you can't do anything about it. I am a person from the lower realm. Are we going to be slaughtered by the Daoyuotian? They even said that we come from the same source, but they still don't put us in their eyes." The old Celestial Master shook his head. "No matter when, it's about strength, not friendship. Moreover, the lower realm is not so bad. Senior Ning Xuanji alone can make the Daoyuotian so afraid. Moreover, the lower realm may not be strong, but it does produce top talents. Needless to say, Chu Xiu is the most troublemaker. I heard that he almost overturned half of the Daoyuotian. Not long ago, he intervened in the dispute of Eastern Qi and forced the Sanskrit sect to retreat. I have to say that kid is indeed a talent in handling matters. And Yi Xiaonan, that person is not simple either. I have fought with him before, and I knew at that time that he would definitely go further than me. Previously, it was this world that was dragging him down. Now that this burden is gone, Yi Xiaonan will definitely soar into the sky. The demonic path is on the rise, and it can't be stopped." Meng Yunqing wanted to say something, but he sighed and shook his head. These 2 couldn't be borrowed from anyone. Chu Xiu had nothing to do with his West Chu. Even if he did, the West Chu royal family wouldn't dare to bring in foreign forces. As for Yi Xiaonan, he was simply a closed-door cultivation maniac. He would cultivate whenever he had time, and even the people in the moon-worshipping sect didn't see him more than a few times. At this moment, someone suddenly came to report that Chu Xiu had come to visit, which stunned Meng Yunqing. They were just talking about Chu Xiu, and they didn't expect him to appear already. "Quick, invite him in." With Chu Xiu's current status in the underworld, he deserved Meng Yunqing to treat him with this kind of caution. Chu Xiu entered the main hall, and couldn't help but be surprised to see the old Celestial Master here. However, regarding the people in the Dragon Vein, Chu Xiu was in a hurry to understand the relationship between them, so he didn't have time to waste. Chu Xiu's eyes turned, and he instantly had an idea. Meng Yunqing cupped his hands and said, "May I know why Cult Master Chu has come to my West Chu?" Chu Xiu greeted the old Celestial Master, then said to Meng Yunqing, "I'm here to make a deal with your Majesty." "A deal? What kind of deal?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. "I've received news that the Dragon Vein of West Chu has been invaded by the extraterrestrial fiends, and they're currently destroying the Dragon Vein. I can help your Majesty eradicate the extraterrestrial fiends, but your Majesty must promise me one thing, and that is to let the people of the Kunlun Devil cult cultivate in the Dragon Vein for a period of time." Meng Yunqing was shocked when he heard this. "Impossible. The Dragon Vein of West Chu is protected by the Meng royal bloodline, and it's filled with formations. It's impossible for anyone to barge in." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Since it's the extraterrestrial fiends, their methods are definitely not something ordinary warriors can imagine. formations and people won't be able to stop them. Since your majesty doesn't believe me, then forget it. I'll take my leave now. Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to leave, Meng Yunqing hurriedly said, Wait, Cult Master Chu. The dragon vein was related to the foundation of the country. Even if Chu Xiu's words were very mysterious, Meng Yunqing didn't dare to ignore him. Meng Yunqing looked at the old celestial master, who also nodded lightly. Although the old celestial master didn't know what Chu Xiu wanted to do, he knew that Chu Xiu wasn't the kind of person who would purposely come to West Chu to deceive Meng Yunqing. Meng Yunqing smiled awkwardly. Cult Master Chu, please forgive me. I'm not doubting you. I'm just surprised. Cult Master Chu, don't worry, I agree to this deal. I'll bring Cult Master Chu to the dragon vein now. Meng Yunqing brought Chu Xiu into the West Chu royal family's secret area, and the old celestial master followed behind them. This made Chu Xiu frown slightly, but he didn't say anything. When they arrived at the dragon vein's secret area, the West Chu people didn't open the door to the dragon vein. They only set up a formation to guard the place. Chu Xiu punched a hole in the dragon vein, exposing the inside of the dragon vein to them. The West Chu dragon vein was even smaller than the Northern Yen dragon vein. The person standing there to intercept the dragon vein was an old man in a yin-yang Taoist robe, but he didn't look like a sage at all. The muscles on his face were grayish-white, connected by bone spikes. He looked like the extraterrestrial demon that Chu Xiu mentioned. In any case, he didn't look like a good person. Meng Yunqing pointed at the old man in Taoist robe and said with a trembling voice, He is. Chu Xiu didn't have time to answer Meng Yunqing's question. He immediately used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth and pounced at the old man in Taoist robe. At this time, the old celestial master stood at the back with a frown. Why did he feel that the old man in Taoist robe looked familiar? Chu Xiu had tried to capture these people alive twice before, but he failed both times. He also failed to investigate the situation inside the door. The West Chu dragon vein was his last chance. If he failed this time, he wouldn't know the truth at all. The essence qi in the dragon vein was stirred. The old man in Taoist robe looked at Chu Xiu. His scarlet eyes were filled with a hint of lightning. The next moment he made a hand seal and countless thunderballs gathered in the air. Purple Heaven Thunderbolt, Ninth Heaven Heavenly Thunder, Divine Devil Slayer Thunder. All kinds of thunder came crashing down, forming a huge thunder formation. Chu Xiu, who was in the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth state, was completely imprisoned in it. They kept bombarding him, making it difficult for him to move. The old man in Taoist robe was even stronger than the city lord of the drifting snow city, and the lord of the Iron Emperor fort. He had the combat power of a fifth heaven martial immortal. At this time, the old celestial master's eyes widened in disbelief. Dragon Tiger Supreme 9 Immortal Scripture. Patriarch. You are the Patriarch. The old celestial master found the Taoist elder familiar, but he didn't recognize him. The flesh on the old man's face seemed to have been sewn back on after being dismembered. Some parts were distorted, and only a rough outline could be seen. But when the old man in Taoist robe attacked, the old celestial master finally recognized him. He was the previous celestial master of the Celestial Master Mansion, 500 years ago. The old celestial master quickly shouted at Chu Xiu. Cult Master Chu, stop for now. He is the previous celestial master of the Celestial Master Mansion. There must be some misunderstanding. Chu Xiu sneered. The previous celestial master? Maybe he was, but now he is an extraterritorial demon. I stopped, but he won't stop. Why don't you call him and see if he agrees? Chapter 1397. The old heavenly master was a little excited to see his patriarch from 500 years ago. However, when he calmed down, he realized that something was amiss. How could someone who had been dead for 500 years come back to life? Furthermore, the previous heavenly master's current appearance was clearly abnormal. Patriarch! Patriarch! The old heavenly master shouted, but the previous heavenly master did not react at all. The thunder formation in his hand smashed toward Chu Xiu even more ferociously. Chu Xiu let out a cold roar and unleashed the invincible sacred demon body to its limit. He threw a punch and completely broke through the seal of the thunder formation. However, in the next moment, the previous heavenly master continued forming the thunder seal. A huge lightning tiger and a lightning dragon took shape in the air. The dragon and tiger converged, charging at Chu Xiu like a giant beast, entangling with him. When the old heavenly master saw that the previous heavenly master did not react, he could not help but ask Chu Xiu, "Cult Master Chu, what's going on?" "How would I know what's going on? Old heavenly master, if you don't come and help me capture him, it'll be too late." Although the previous heavenly master's cultivation was on par with the fifth heaven, it was still very easy for Chu Xiu to take care of him. However, Chu Xiu did not dare to kill him. Instead, he was controlling his strength and looking for an opportunity to capture his opponent alive. Chu Xiu had roughly figured out the pattern from the previous 2 times. As long as he could completely suppress his opponent with his strength, causing his opponent to think that he could not defend himself, his opponent would automatically turn into ashes. Therefore, Chu Xiu could not unleash his strongest strength yet. He had to find an opportunity to defeat his opponent with a single strike and completely seal his opponent's strength. Although the old heavenly master had no idea what was going on, he had no choice but to make a move. Although the old celestial master was only a rank 3 martial immortal, he was very familiar with the techniques of the celestial master mansion. Seeing that Chu Xiu was fighting the lightning dragon and tiger, the old heavenly master said in a low voice, "Dragon and tiger converge. Wind and cloud gather. Dragon and tiger are yin and yang. Wind and cloud gather and disperse to form lightning." Cult Master Chu, the core of this move is the power of yin and yang. Attack the source and cause yin and yang to become chaotic, and you can easily break through it. Chu Xiu nodded. The creation demonic chi transformed into a long saber and slashed out, instantly splitting the dragon and tiger apart. At the same time, the demonic chi saber twisted and turned into a huge creation heavenly demon phantom, enveloping the thunder dragon completely. Boundless creation demonic chi seeped into the thunder dragon. In an instant, the balance of yin and yang had been disrupted. Chu Xiu's fist fell, and the dragon and tiger were completely smashed. A sword appeared in the hands of the previous heavenly master. It was a long sword formed entirely of greenish-purple lightning. As the longsword pointed to the sky, the moving lightning condensed into the power of laws, intertwining in midair to form a scroll written entirely with lightning. Lightning Heavenly Tome. The old heavenly master's expression changed instantly. This was the ultimate skill of the previous heavenly master. However, at that time, the previous heavenly master could only weave the lightning heavenly tome with his earth energy, and then use the power of heaven and earth. But now, the previous heavenly master could actually weave the lightning heavenly tome with the power of laws. The old heavenly master gritted his teeth and formed a seal with his hands. Boundless lightning energy poured out of his seemingly thin body, turning into the image of the 9 heavens' responsive thunder heavenly lord. It supported the sky and earth, blocking the lightning heavenly tome. In the next moment, boundless lightning fell, its color already glaring white, illuminating the entire space of the dragon vein as if it was daytime. While the old celestial master was blocking the attack, Chu Xiu unleashed his 6th samsara wheel of splendor. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not use the power of the 6 paths to kill the previous heavenly master. Instead, he used the power of the human realm with all his might. A misty aura completely enveloped the previous heavenly master, assimilating and destroying his power, not allowing him to use any power. Chu Xiu grabbed the previous heavenly master and formed another seal with his hands. The power of the heavenly demon of creation formed an extremely huge demonic domain around them, prohibiting any kind of foreign power. The old heavenly master also came over and shouted, "Ancestral Master! Ancestral Master! Do you still recognize me?" When the previous heavenly master passed away, the heavenly master residence actually had a period of time. At that time, the heavenly master residence was also full of talents, and the old heavenly master was only a young Taoist priest not famous. However, the previous heavenly master definitely recognized him, and even gave him pointers on martial arts. At that moment, the previous heavenly master's body struggled. Lightning flashed, but the lightning did not spread outwards, instead entering his body. The red glow in the previous heavenly master's eyes faded, revealing a pair of slightly turbid eyes. However, it was only at this moment that a hint of humanity appeared in his eyes. The previous heavenly master looked at the old heavenly master, and the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a strange smile. He said in a hoarse voice, "Yenyuan, you did well." Zhang Yenyuan was the old heavenly master's secular name, and it had been a long time since anyone called him that. Hearing that, the old heavenly master's eyes lit up. He suppressed the excitement in his heart, wanting to ask what exactly was going on. However, at that moment, the previous heavenly master immediately turned to look at Chu Xiu, and said in a low voice, "Isn't he?" As soon as he said those 3 words, the previous heavenly master's eyes suddenly shone with a red glow. Chu Xiu secretly cursed. As expected, without any warning, Chu Xiu did not even notice any leakage of power, and the previous heavenly master's body directly turned into ashes. This time, Chu Xiu's actions were extremely fast. The moment the red light lit up, his figure had already shifted to the side of the bone sword. At that moment, the bone sword also began to turn into ashes, and the door was dissipating. At that critical moment, Chu Xiu had no time to think. He immediately separated a wisp of his primordial spirit and sent it into the door. What appeared in Chu Xiu's perception was a sea of blood, a boundless sea of blood. This scene was both familiar and unfamiliar to Chu Xiu, because he had seen it before. This was the scene in Netherworld Heaven. This matter was similar to what Chu Xiu had guessed. The erosion of the dragon veins of the 3 kingdoms was indeed the handiwork of Dugu Weiwei. However, what was even more shocking was that no one knew how long Dugu Weiwei had been doing this. If not for this coincidence, Chu Xiu had intervened in the matter of Eastern Qi, and LV Longguang had been prepared to ride on Chu Xiu's coattails. He might not even have discovered this matter. On the other side, the door had already been cut off, and the wisp of power of Chu Xiu's primordial spirit began to rapidly deplete. Relying on the weak power of his primordial spirit, Chu Xiu desperately tried to see what Netherworld Heaven looked like, but all he saw was a sea of blood in the Netherworld. Countless white bones floated in it, and he could vaguely see countless vengeful spirits struggling below, trying to break free. At this moment, the sea of blood churned, and Chu Xiu could vaguely see that the sea of blood in the distance had begun to boil violently. A white bone throne slowly rose from the sea of blood, and there seemed to be a figure sitting on it. However, this was already the last scene Chu Xiu saw. In the next moment, the power of Chu Xiu's primordial spirit was completely depleted. On the other side, Chu Xiu let out a muffled grunt, and his face turned pale. As the door was cut off, that wisp of his primordial spirit had completely dissipated, and he could not retrieve it. This kind of damage to the primordial spirit was permanent, and it would take a lot of energy to recover. However, after seeing the scene on the other side of the door, he confirmed his guess, and it was not a loss. At this moment, the old celestial master turned his head and said with a serious expression, "Cult Master Chu, what was that just now? Why did the previous celestial master of my celestial master abode resurrect? Don't use the excuse of extraterrestrial demons to fool me." Chu Xiu took a deep breath and said, "Old celestial master, would you believe me if I told you that I don't know?" The old celestial master stared at Chu Xiu, and in the end, he could only sigh helplessly. "I believe you." He had no choice but to believe him. He was no match for Chu Xiu, and if Chu Xiu did not want to tell him, was he supposed to force it out of him? Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, "Actually, I really don't know." He could not tell him about Dugu Weiwei or Yellow Springs Heaven. Chu Xiu did not know how those beings from 500 years ago were resurrected, so he could only say that he did not know. However, Chu Xiu pondered for a moment, then asked the old celestial master, "Old celestial master, do you know where people go after they die?" The old celestial master instinctively said, "Where else can they go after they die?" However, after saying that, the old celestial master was stunned. If they had really died, then how could the scene from earlier be explained? An existence from 500 years ago was resurrected. Could this also be considered as death? Chu Xiu shook his head. "The world is too big. You and I think we can understand it, but there are too many things we don't understand. We can't even understand the word life and death. Reincarnation, rebirth. Are these things just legends, or do they really exist? Can anyone really figure it out? The old celestial master rubbed his head. Of course he did not know. What had happened today had destroyed his worldview. He was old and had yet to digest it all. Chu Xiu turned to Meng Yunqing. Your Majesty, I've already cleaned up the Western Chu Dragon Vein for you. Don't forget our previous deal. I'll be coming to the Western Chu Dragon Vein in a while to bring some people to cultivate. The 3 dragon veins of Eastern Qi, Western Chu, and Northern Yan were all damaged at this time, and a part of their power had been absorbed. However, it did not matter. The dragon veins themselves were natural objects. Except for the dragon vein of Eastern Qi, the other 2 could slowly recover even if they were damaged. Chu Xiu could now directly absorb the power in the dragon vein to cultivate. Because there were 3 dragon veins, he could give the other 2 to others. At the very least, 1 dragon vein could accommodate 3 or 4 first to third heaven martial immortals, or about 10 heaven and earth profound enlightenment cultivators. However, Chu Xiu did not have time to cultivate now. He still had to go to the Dalyu Ocean to ask Heavenly Soul about the various phenomena that had appeared in the lower realm. Meng Yunqing naturally would not talk about these things, and since it involved the previous Celestial Master of the Celestial Master Mansion, the old Celestial Master naturally would not talk about it. After leaving the aftermath to them, Chu Xiu directly returned to the Dalyu Ocean through the southern barbaric land passage, and went straight to the High Heaven sect to find Heavenly Soul. Chapter 1398. After the High Heaven sect completely submitted to the Kunlun Devil cult, the disciples naturally recognized Chu Xiu. So Chu Xiu arrived at the spiritual cloud realm unimpeded. Standing in front of the spiritual cloud realm for a moment, Chu Xiu sighed, opened the spirit array, and stepped into the spiritual cloud realm. In the misty spiritual cloud realm, Tianhun noticed the arrival of Chu Xiu. He raised his head, which had been lowered, and revealed a slightly strange smile. Oh, you've reached the 5th heaven so quickly. Are you here to let me out? Chu Xiu stared at Tianhun, shook his head gently and said, If I said I was going to let you out, would you believe me? Tianhun also shook his head and said, Of course not. If you let me out so easily, you wouldn't be an earth soul. The cultivation of the 5th heaven is not enough to make you arrogant and let your guard down. Let me out just like that. Don't worry, there's no need to play these tricks between us. I know that you will never let me go until you have absolute confidence in controlling me. Why did you come this time? What problems did you find? Chu Xiu nodded and said, I found some problems about Netherworld Heaven. Some of the arrangements made by Dugu Weiwei in the lower realm are somewhat beyond my imagination. With that, Chu Xiu told Tianhun about the things he had found in the 3 dragon veins. Tianhun raised his eyebrows and said, All the people who died 500 years ago have been resurrected? And they have obtained more powerful combat power than when they were alive? Chu Xiu nodded and said, Yes, everyone has become a martial immortal, but their strength is not the same. They should have improved according to their strength when they were alive. Do you know what's going on? But what does the life soul plan to do in the lower realm? Tianhun shook his head and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Ever since the Dalyu Ocean battle, the heaven, earth, and life souls have been completely separated. So after the life souls went to the Yellow Springs heaven, I definitely don't know what arrangements they made or what they discovered. That's why I said that when the real Dugu Weiwei appears in Netherworld Heaven, his strength will definitely be beyond your imagination. At my peak, I can only recover to the level of Dugu Weiwei from 500 years ago when I fought the Dalyu Ocean. As for you, you have to be stronger than him at that time to have a chance of fighting Dugu Life Soul. As for descending to the mortal world, from the looks of it, you must have destroyed the gate of heaven, causing the Dalyu Ocean to descend to the mortal world, right? Chu Xiu nodded and said, That's right. The Dalyu Ocean sects have already established themselves in the lower realm. Tianhun said in a low voice, Don't underestimate the lower worlds. In fact, the lower worlds have more potential than the Dalyu Ocean. The Dalyu Ocean is an unexploited world, so it's rich in resources. But what about the lower worlds? Chu Xiu said doubtfully. The resources in the lower world shouldn't be as rich as the Dalyu Ocean. They've already been exploited for 10,000 years, and their vitality isn't abundant. There aren't even any decent ferocious beasts. In the past, when the Kunlun devil cult was established in the Dalyu Ocean, the old barbarian king had obtained a mountain dragon. It was a genuine dragon, but it was already extinct in the lower worlds. Tian Hun shook his head and said, "Wrong. The resources in the lower worlds aren't as rich as the Dalyu Ocean, but there are many treasures buried in the lower worlds. Do you think the lower worlds are just the lower worlds? The current lower worlds are a combination of the mortal world and the mortal world. In the past, the geniuses in the mortal world were the true golden age of martial arts. All kinds of amazing experts emerged one after another, and all kinds of top martial arts sects sprouted like bamboo shoots after the rain. The Dalyu Ocean that you see now is indeed strong, but it's only on the basis of the mortal world. They're just a group of ants struggling to escape. On the shoulders of the golden age of martial arts, they created the prosperity of the Dalyu Ocean. The truly good things are still buried in the lower worlds. Although the ancient calamity caused the mortal world to be destroyed, the remaining mortal world has already merged with the mortal world, and some of the things in it have been preserved. The most important reason for the Dalyu Ocean sects to descend to the lower worlds is to find the things that their ancestors didn't take away." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "If you know about these things, then the Dugu Weiwei of the past definitely knows about them too. Why didn't he dig them out back then? Do you think that the Dugu Weiwei of the past still needed these things?" Chu Xiu choked for a moment. Indeed, with the strength of the Dugu Weiwei, he didn't need these external things. They weren't even the icing on the cake. However, the Dugu Weiwei doesn't need these things, but you have the chance to use them now. Let me think, what place hasn't been dug out yet? Oh right, is the Central Plains under your control now? Chu Xiu nodded and said, "You can say so. However, the Central Plains is a vast land with abundant resources. There are many sects and powers. The Kunlun demon sect only controls a portion of the power. However, my relationship with the imperial court that controls the Central Plains is not bad." Tian Hun said, "Then it's easy. In the deepest part of the Central Plains are the ruins of the primordial divine palace. That was a sect that existed tens of thousands of years ago. Yes, you can say that it's a sect of lunatics. Those people got tired of playing around with martial arts and wanted to create gods. Thus, they came into contact with some of the world's source energy and left some things there. I don't know the specifics, but if you can fuse with them, you will gain great benefits." Chu Xiu nodded. Suddenly he said, "Why didn't you say so earlier? If you had, I would have gone looking for that place long ago." Tian Hun rolled his eyes and said, "You should have said so earlier. Are you strong enough? Those lunatics from the primordial divine palace are very wild. Although I don't know how they set up the ruins, it is possible for them to kill 1 or 2 martial immortals below the 3rd heavenly layer." As he spoke, Tian Hun used his primordial spirit's power to draw out a special symbol. It looked like a hieroglyph and resembled a human. "Go and find it according to this symbol. After you find it, don't let them dig it open. Go and open it yourself. Otherwise, I won't care if all your subordinates die." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Very well, I'll take my leave first. I feel that the day I let you out should not be far away." After Chu Xiu left, Tian Hun looked at Chu Xiu's back and muttered, "That's right, it's not far. However, it should be a bit slower." After returning to the lower realms, Chu Xiu called Wei Shuya and the others over, and arranged for them to enter the 3 nations' dragon veins to train. Although the dragon veins were capable of self-healing, the power they emitted before they healed could be easily absorbed by others. The people under Chu Xiu could enter the 3 nations' dragon veins and increase their strength explosively. This was especially so for Shang Tianliang, Lu Jianghe, and Lu Fengxian. The 3 of them had already reached the half-step martial immortal realm. Their comprehension was also sufficient. With the help of the dragon veins' power, they could definitely step into the true martial immortal realm. After making arrangements for them, Chu Xiu looked for LV Longguang and asked him to mobilize all of Eastern Qi's power to search for clues about the original God Palace. Meanwhile, he prepared to cultivate in seclusion in Eastern Qi's dragon veins. LV Longguang asked carefully, May I ask, Cult Master Chu, what kind of place is this? Chu Xiu said with a faint smile. It's a good place for me, but it's not necessarily the same for you. Of course, you can also try to enter it. However, don't blame me for not warning you if you die. After hearing Chu Xiu's words, LV Longguang immediately stopped talking. He did not dare to be blinded by greed and get involved in the things that these influential figures played with. During the time that Chu Xiu cultivated in seclusion, the entire lower realm seemed peaceful. However, in reality, all the factions had made their moves. Tianhun was right. The factions had not only come to the lower realm to fight for providence and recruit disciples. They were also plotting to dig out the things that their ancestors had left behind. 10,000 years had passed. Although they did not know if those things could still be found in the lower realm, as long as they could find one, it would not be a wasted trip. Eastern Qi's Donghai County. This place belonged to the border of Eastern Qi, and was close to the East Sea. Although it also belonged to Eastern Qi, it was far away from the Central Plains. After the heavenly demonic palace came to the lower realm, they settled down here. The sects in the southern territory had already been destroyed by Chu Xiu. It could be said that they were the most low-key group after the lower realm. Although the heavenly demonic palace did not make an enemy of Chu Xiu, the only expert in the 8th heaven of the heavenly demonic palace, Zhuo Qiuliang, was trapped in the heavenly demonic palace in the southern territory due to an accident. He could not move. As an expert in the 8th heaven, the role that he could play was very limited. He could only barely prevent the heavenly demonic palace from being destroyed. Therefore, the heavenly demonic palace only had Yuan Kongqing, who had just stepped into the 5th heaven of the heavenly demonic palace. Their deterrence was limited. However, the most tragic thing was their situation after the lower realm. When the heavenly demonic palace wanted to recruit a group of disciples excitedly, they discovered to their dismay that the entire demonic path in the lower realm had been unified by Chu Xiu. There were no demonic path warriors who would suddenly join the heavenly demonic palace. Of course, there were those demonic path rogue cultivators who were not very powerful. However, even the heavenly demonic palace looked down on them. As for whether they should compete with Chu Xiu for the orthodoxy of the demonic path, the heavenly demonic palace did not even think about it. The heavenly demonic palace had joined forces with Chu Xiu several times, but it was because of this that they knew how terrifying Chu Xiu was. It was not that they did not want to fall out with Chu Xiu and compete for the orthodoxy of the demonic path, but they did not dare to. Therefore, ever since they came to the lower realm, the heavenly demonic palace had been taking root in the East Sea County in a low-key manner. To outsiders, their presence was a little low, but in fact the heavenly demonic palace was very busy. At this time, at the edge of the coast of the East Sea County, the formation masters of the heavenly demonic palace had set up layer after layer of formations here, blocking all the seawater at the edge. In addition, there were hundreds of disciples constantly digging, even using formation discs to sense the aura below, changing positions from time to time. At this time, Yuan Kongqing was personally directing the people of the heavenly demonic palace to dig. A heavenly demonic palace warrior next to him said hesitantly, "Deputy Palace Master, that legendary person is not our heavenly demonic palace's ancestral master. Are we really going to dig him out? Besides, it has been so many years, his Yuan Shen has probably dissipated long ago, right?" Yuan Kongqing waved his hand, his eyes flashing with fanaticism. "What do you know? That person is the strongest in the history of the demonic path, and he is known as the supreme heavenly demon. Although the ancestor of the heavenly demonic palace is not him, we have received guidance from him. At present, the palace master is trapped in the heavenly demonic palace, and with his cultivation base of the 8th layer, he can only sit in the depths of the palace. With the guidance of Lord Supreme Heavenly Demon, the palace master can completely escape, and even have a chance to reach the 9th layer." Chapter 1399. Daoyuotian Taoism, Buddhism, and Diabolism had 3 branches. Taoism had the 3 pristines temple, and every Taoist lord had been the strongest among the strong. Buddhism also had Sanskrit and heavenly Luo Pao, and every Sanskrit leader and revered lord had the chance to stand at the peak of the world. However, diabolism was the most miserable. Although Bliss Demon Palace and Sky Demon Palace were not weak, they had never stood at the peak of Deluocean. The reason was not that Bliss Demon Palace and Sky Demon Palace were not weak, but that diabolism had already suffered a blow in the lower realm 10,000 years ago. And the culprit was the supreme heavenly demon that Yuan Kongqing wanted to dig out. This person had no name, and did not even belong to a sect. When he became famous in the pugilistic world more than 10,000 years ago, he had already called himself the supreme heavenly demon, and was known as the strongest expert of diabolism since ancient times. Of course, he wasn't bragging. At least, he wasn't bragging in the first half of his sentence. In his era, the supreme heavenly demon was the #1 demonic cultivator. Demonic sects like the Heavenly Demon Palace were almost all his subordinates. However, this supreme heavenly demon only existed for a very short time. Not long after he stood at the peak of pugilistic world, he was sealed by all the experts of the pugilistic world. The reason was simple. This supreme heavenly demon was extremely arrogant. Back then, he did not care about any sect in the pugilistic world. Not only did he offend many people with his arrogance, he even wanted to study the path of immortality, and in order to research a forbidden demonic technique, he even killed martial immortals to experiment. This kind of behavior could be said to be a great taboo in pugilistic world. How could a martial immortal who stood at the peak be slaughtered and studied wantonly? Therefore, back then, when the experts of many sects attacked together and destroyed his physical body, they found that they could not destroy his primordial spirit. Previously, the Daluotian sealed Duguweiwei, because they were afraid of Duguweiwei. Once he was killed, his primordial spirit would become even more terrifying after it was possessed, and could easily return to its peak strength. However, although the forbidden demonic art that the Supreme Sky Demon researched did not succeed, there was still some progress. At the very least, he succeeded in turning himself into a monster. His primordial spirit was close to being indestructible, so he could not be killed and could only be sealed. All these years, even before the great ancient calamity, the fiendish Tao had never thought of digging out a supreme sky fiend. One of the reasons was because the Taoist and Buddhist lineages were watching. Whoever wanted to dig out this lunatic would become the enemy of the entire pugilistic world. The other reason was that the Blissful Devil Palace and the Sky Devil Palace had already developed to the pinnacle of the devil path, and neither of them wanted to release an ancestor. But now, his Sky Demon Palace was in a difficult situation, and they coincidentally came to the lower realm, and found the place where the Supreme Heavenly Demon was sealed in the past. This kind of opportunity was almost given to his Sky Demon Palace by the heavens. After discussing with Zuoqiu Liang, Yuan Kongqing decided to dig out the ruins, and release the Supreme Heavenly Demon. Found it. At this time, the Sky Demon Palace martial artists below shouted in surprise. They had already dug out the bottom of the cave on the coast, revealing a palace completely made of bronze. But although it was called a palace, it was actually a square iron shell like a coffin. There were no doors or windows, and the formation patterns of Taoist, Buddhist, and even fiendish Tao were engraved on it. Looking at the sealed palace, Yuan Kongqing felt a little uneasy in his heart. This was the last chance for his Sky Demon Palace to rise again, but in fact he was not confident. According to the records, the power of all the big sects in the pugilistic world back then had not been able to completely destroy the Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit, causing it to be close to an indestructible state. But the problem was that indestructibility did not mean immortality. 10,000 years had passed. Who knew what it had become? Open it. Yuan Kongqing gave the order, and all the array masters of Sky Demon Palace began to prepare to break the formation. 10,000 years had passed since the Supreme Heavenly Demon was sealed in the palace. In fact, 90% of the formation on the surface had been destroyed, but the Supreme Heavenly Demon still had not taken the initiative to escape. This was not good news for Yuan Kongqing, because it meant that the Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit had dissipated, or had become very weak. More than 10 array masters of Sky Demon Palace finished setting up the formation. In an instant, countless rays of light shrouded the bronze palace, and the formation on it began to melt. Accompanied by a creaking sound, the entire bronze palace began to crack, and a large amount of black fog spilled out. At the same time, a long sigh came from within. Finally, I see the light of day again. Yuan Kongqing's face revealed a look of ecstasy. He had gambled correctly. The supreme heavenly demon that was sealed in the palace was still alive. But before Yuan Kongqing could say anything, the black fog began to sweep out in an instant. The surrounding array masters were all shrouded in the black fog, and in an instant, they did not even have the chance to scream, and were instantly sucked dry. Seeing this scene, Yuan Kongqing's face darkened. Although the strength of these array masters was not strong, they were still array masters, and could not be measured by strength. Losing so many array masters at once, it could be said that the array masters that his Sky Demon Palace had accumulated for so many years had all been destroyed. At this moment, the black fog that had absorbed the blood of the array masters finally began to condense, turning into a seemingly corporeal, but erratic existence. It was a skinny old man shrouded in black fog, so skinny that he looked like a skeleton. It was very frightening, but the expression on his face was insufferably arrogant. Even Yuan Kongqing had a feeling that the old man was looking at him, as if he was looking at an ant, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. But the next moment, the supreme heavenly demon waved his hand, and boundless demonic aura suddenly emerged from the void, wrapping around him. Yuan Kongqing's expression changed abruptly. He could feel that the power was not very strong, and was only equivalent to the realm of a first heaven martial immortal. But it was precisely this weak power that drew forth the power of laws was abnormally strong. So strong that even Yuan Kongqing, a fifth heaven martial immortal, felt threatened. The heaven-covering demonic hand was unleashed, but it was not aimed at the supreme heavenly demon. Instead, it enveloped him, enduring the corrosion of the demonic aura. Yuan Kongqing shouted, "Senior, I am a disciple of the Sky Demon Palace. Do you still remember the Sky Demon Palace?" With a wave of the supreme heavenly demon's hand, the demonic aura dissipated, but the black fog around him began to boil even more violently. "Sky Demon Palace? You are from the Sky Demon Palace? How long has it been?" Yuan Kongqing said carefully. "It should have been more than 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, a great change occurred in the lower realms. At that time, Senior, you were already sealed and we—" Before Yuan Kongqing could finish, the supreme heavenly demon interrupted him. 10,000 years? Ha ha. It's been 10,000 years, and I am still alive. The origin of the primordial spirit has not dissipated, and I have succeeded. Those self-righteous idiots who thought I was a madman have all turned into ashes, and I am still alive. If they had not stopped me, I would have discovered the secret of eternal life, and made my body immortal." Yuan Kongqing was sweating profusely at this time. He suddenly felt that digging this person out seemed to be a wrong decision. No wonder those people called him a madman 10,000 years ago. In fact, the supreme heavenly demon's current appearance was indeed very much like a madman. At this time, the supreme heavenly demon suddenly asked, "Who is the strongest demonic cultivator in the pugilistic world now? Where is he?" Yuan Kongqing said subconsciously, "The palace lord cannot move, so it should be the Kunlun devil cult's Chu Xiao. He should be in Eastern Qi now." But after saying this subconsciously, Yuan Kongqing felt that something was wrong. He immediately asked warily, "Senior, what do you want to do? The Kunlun devil cult and my heavenly demon palace are allies, and Chu Xiao." Before he could finish, the supreme heavenly demon had already turned into a black fog, and swallowed a heavenly demon palace disciple. "Lend me your disciple's memory. Kid, let me out. I will not forget this merit. Whether you are Heavenly Demon Palace or Earth Demon Palace, I will make you the #1 demonic sect in the world. But the most important thing now is to find a body to possess. Besides the world's #1 demonic cultivator, who else's body is worthy of me? Don't worry, I will be back soon." After saying this, the supreme heavenly demon did not give Yuan Kongqing a chance to speak, and directly rushed towards Eastern Qi. "Oh no!" Yuan Kongqing slapped his thigh, and his expression suddenly changed. The supreme heavenly demon's speed was extremely fast, and he actually could not catch up with him. And even if he did catch up with that person's character, he reckoned that he would not listen to him. Therefore, he could only chase as fast as he could, and only hope that that person would not cause him big trouble. To him, the supreme heavenly demon was only a legendary existence, but the terrifying power of Chu Xiu was right in front of him, and he had seen it with his own eyes. At this time, within the dragon vein of Eastern Qi, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were both cultivating. As the dragon vein of Eastern Qi was the largest, the power that overflowed was also the most. Even if Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were cultivating in it at the same time, it was enough. At this time, Lu Fengxian's body was already surrounded by countless power of rules, and Chu Xiu was not cultivating, but was standing guard at the side. After a while, the power of rules that were materialized like silk threads all flowed into Lu Fengxian's body, and her aura was instantly refreshed, and her spirit soared to the sky. Lu Fengxian opened her eyes and murmured, "Is this the power of a martial immortal? Controlling the rules, that's amazing. Brother Lu, congratulations on stepping into the martial immortal realm and becoming a demigod. Now you can be considered to be standing at the peak of martial arts." Lu Fengxian smiled. "I'm only at stage 1. Brother Chu, I've seen you fight so many elites, and you're not even at the peak. How can I be considered at the peak with my meager strength? But my biggest advantage in this life is that I'm lucky to have met you, Brother Chu. Otherwise, I might still be mingling with the lone cultivators." Just as Chu Xiu was about to say something to end this business exchange, a voice suddenly came from outside. "Where is Chu Xiu? Come out and greet me." Chapter 1400. Supreme Heavenly Demon's figure floated in midair, and his voice resounded throughout the entire Eastern Qi Imperial City. However, everyone who heard Supreme Heavenly Demon's voice was dumbfounded. In this era, there was still someone who dared to speak to Chu Xiu in such a manner? It was no longer a secret that Chu Xiu controlled the forces. In the lower realm, he unified the Devil Dao, and the Dao Ocean controlled the eastern region. At the same time, he was on good terms with the old barbarian king, an expert comparable to the ninth heaven. In addition, he had an unknown trump card in his hand. Even the dean of the Star River Martial Academy, Meng Xinghe, and the Brahmin sect leader hated him to the core, but they could not do anything to him. It could be said that with Chu Xiu's current strength and the forces he controlled, even if the 3 Pristine's palace's Dao Lords came, they would not be qualified for Chu Xiu to greet them. Had this person lost his mind? In the secret land of the Dragon Vein, Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu looked at each other, and they were also dumbfounded. It was normal for someone to come and find trouble with him, but for someone to use such a tone to find trouble with him, could it be that this person was a fool? Chu Xiu followed Lu Fengxian out of the Dragon Vein, and saw the scene of the boundless black fog shrouding the entire Eastern Qi Imperial City. The Devil Qi covered the sky and even condensed into a black dragon throne, which floated in midair, and Supreme Heavenly Demon sat cross-legged on it. Chu Xiu frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Supreme Heavenly Demon waved his hand and said, "Even if I say my name, I guess a junior like you would not have heard of it. You only need to remember that I am the #1 person in the Devil Dao since ancient times, and that is enough." Chu Xiu looked at the arrogant Supreme Heavenly Demon, and did not know where he got his confidence from. #1 person in the Devil Dao since ancient times? Did he ask Dugu Weiwei? At this time, Supreme Heavenly Demon looked at Chu Xiu and nodded his head in satisfaction. His body is young and powerful, and his vitality is abundant. He is qualified to be my body. Junior, if you take the initiative to offer your body, I can promise you that after I research the secret method of immortality, I will reconstruct your body and make you the second immortal in this world. Chu Xiu looked at the unparalleled Heavenly Demon, as though he was looking at an idiot. Where did this lunatic come from? For his opponent to be able to unleash the might of a martial immortal with only his primordial spirit, he was most definitely no fool. But if he wasn't a fool, why would he say something so ridiculous? He was either a fool or a madman. Immortality? Immortality? Longevity? This was simply like playing house. Peak existences like Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had been searching for such a long time, but still couldn't find it. Dao Master and other supreme experts of the 9 heavens were still searching for it. How could you say that you could figure it out? This was simply a joke. Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He said coldly, "What are you? If you don't want to talk, I will capture you and slowly study you." Supreme Heavenly Demon's face darkened immediately. "You dare to call me a thing?" There was something wrong with his words. Lu Fengxian, who was watching the battle from below, almost laughed out loud. He wasn't worried about Chu Xiu at all. If he couldn't even deal with such a strange thing like Chu Xiu, then he wouldn't be Chu Xiu. After being trapped for tens of thousands of years, Supreme Heavenly Demon's consciousness was actually a little chaotic. However, he had a crazy and paranoid personality. In other words, he was really a lunatic. A lunatic who had great power in the past, and was not weak now. But a lunatic wasn't a fool. He could still hear the sarcasm in Chu Xiu's words. Countless demonic chi surged around them. Soundless Heavenly Demon shouted, "How dare you!" Before he could finish his words, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to listen to him anymore. He directly attacked. He formed hand seals and formed a cross-shaped lotus seal. Boundless Buddhist light blossomed with dazzling radiance. As the cross-shaped lotus blossomed, it smashed into the boundless demonic fog. Immediately, the demonic fog dispersed and light was revealed. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. "So it's actually a spearhead that looks like wax." Supreme Heavenly Demon roared crazily. Boundless demonic energy condensed into 9 demonic dragons. They formed a formation and charged towards Chu Xiu. At his peak, he was also a peak expert of the 9th heaven. Merely, he no longer had a physical body. Furthermore, he had been trapped for over 10,000 years. Even his primordial spirit was extremely weak. His overall strength was only equivalent to that of a first heaven martial immortal. That said, it remained that he was a peak existence of the 9th heaven. Even though he only had a weak primordial spirit, the power of laws and the various changes in the path of martial cultivation that he could control still far surpassed that of cultivators of the same cultivation. He was able to unleash power comparable to a 5th or 6th heaven martial immortal. Unfortunately for him, he had encountered Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu, who possessed astonishing power, was completely capable of shattering all of his flashy things with brute force. He unsheathed the breaking formation and slashed out with a heaven-devouring slash. Boundless saber intent condensed into a black hole. Everywhere it passed, it devoured and destroyed everything. The 9 demonic dragons were instantly shattered. Before the Supreme Heavenly Demon could react, Chu Xiu had already slashed his saber at him. Supreme Heavenly Demon roared and charged at Chu Xiu. He used the power of his primordial spirit to take on the heaven-devouring slash. Although the 7 limits were not saber techniques that targeted one's primordial spirit, the pure power of the saber intent was sufficient to tear apart the body of a primordial spirit. However, the Supreme Heavenly Demon had truly refined his primordial spirit to an extremely bizarre state. In Chu Xiu's perception, the other party's primordial spirit had already fused with the power of the rules between heaven and earth. This method was actually a deviant path to becoming a demon. In the past, Yi Weikong had tried it before. In the end, although it allowed him to advance from the 7th level of heaven to the 8th level of heaven and earth when he aged, it was actually suicide. He used great power in exchange for the extinction of his real spirit. No matter how strong a warrior's primordial spirit consciousness was, it could not be stronger than the ruthless rules of heaven and earth. However, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was different. He was the exact opposite. Instead of fusing with the rules, he allowed the rules to fuse with him. He used a very strange method to separate a portion of the power of the rules and fuse it with his primordial spirit. In this way, even if his primordial spirit was damaged, as long as the rules that he fused with were not destroyed, he could immediately recover. This was also considered a different kind of indestructibility. As long as the rules were not completely destroyed and still existed in this world, he was an indestructible existence. Die. The Supreme Heavenly Demon roared furiously. The power of his primordial spirit affected the rules, causing the surrounding demonic flames to burn violently and surge toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and cast the law embodiment of heaven and earth. He extinguished all the demonic flames with a punch and blasted the Supreme Heavenly Demon into the ground at the same time. The other party was a primordial spirit. Even if it was torn apart by the powerful rules of the law embodiment of heaven and earth, it could still repair itself in a very short time. However, before the other party could do anything, Chu Xiu blasted out another punch and tore it apart again. He did not believe that there was true indestructibility in this world at all. That was a realm that Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had yet to pursue. How could a madman obtain it? Besides, Chu Xiu also discovered that every time the other party's primordial spirit was torn apart, the source of the primordial spirit would weaken a little. When the other party was extremely weak, he could even seal it at will and throw it into his ring or bracelet. He could completely pretend to be an old grandpa. Junior, you're courting death. When this lord regains his strength, I will refine your primordial spirit into a demonic puppet, so that you can never be reincarnated. The supreme heavenly demon cursed furiously, but Chu Xiu despised the fact that the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth consumed too much energy. He immediately unleashed the 6 samsara wheels, trapping the supreme heavenly demon within and killing him. The supreme heavenly demon couldn't even condense his body anymore. At this moment, Yuan Kongqing hurriedly landed from midair and shouted, "Cult Master Chu, have mercy!" Chu Xiu looked up at Yuan Kongqing, but the 6 paths wheel was still spinning violently. "This thing belongs to your heavenly demon palace?" Yuan Kongqing smiled bitterly and said, "Cult Master Chu, please forgive me, this is actually an accident. This is the strongest demonic cultivator in the pugilistic world before the great ancient calamity, Supreme Heavenly Demon. He was sealed by all the experts in the pugilistic world at that time. We, the Heavenly Demon Palace, have some history with him, so we tried so hard to dig him out. There must be some misunderstanding in the Supreme Heavenly Demon attacking you. We, the Heavenly Demon Palace, have absolutely no intention of making an enemy out of you, Official Chu." At this moment, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was still clamoring in the 6 paths wheel. "That junior from the Heavenly Demon Palace. What are you waiting for if you don't act now?" Yuan Kongqing was actually a very cautious person, especially since he was actually very familiar with Chu Xiu. Ever since Chu Xiu became a martial immortal, he had already cooperated with Chu Xiu. He had personally witnessed Chu Xiu's rise from the Daluocean. It could be said that he would kill anyone who stood in his way. And if Buddha stood in his way, he would kill Buddha. Even if this person before him was the legendary Supreme Heavenly Demon, an existence of the 9 heavens in the past, he would not dare to make an enemy out of Chu Xiu. Moreover, looking at the situation now, he knew that this person was being beaten up by Chu Xiu, and had no way of fighting back. It was uncertain how much strength he would have after he recovered to his peak, so how would Yuan Kongqing dare to challenge Chu Xiu for him? "Senior, can you let me finish? Cult Master Chu is an ally of the Heavenly Demon Palace. He is not to be provoked. Even if you want to possess someone else, can't you change it to someone else?" The Supreme Heavenly Demon scolded. "Useless. With such a little bit of courage, you are far inferior to the ancestors of the Heavenly Demon Palace." As soon as Supreme Sky Demon's voice fell, he took the initiative to detonate half of his primordial spirit. The power that erupted in that instant allowed him to break through the shackles of the 6 Saha Samsara wheels and escape towards the west. "Junior, keep your body for now. I will first get the body of the 2nd strongest demonic cultivator, and then I will settle the score with you." Seeing that the Supreme Heavenly Demon had escaped, Yuan Kongqing heaved a sigh of relief and quickly apologized to Chu Xiu, hoping that he would forgive him. "Cult Master Chu, don't worry, the Supreme Heavenly Demon has just been released from the seal, so he is still a little confused. I will stop him, and definitely won't cause trouble for you, Cult Master Chu." Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange as he said, "You and I have been friends for so many years, Palace Master Yuan. You don't have to worry about it. But if I'm not wrong, you might have other troubles. That thing, that Supreme Heavenly Demon might have gone to West Chu to find Yi Xiaonan of the moon-worshipping cult. Is Yi Xiaonan difficult to deal with?" Yuan Kongqing knew that Yi Xiaonan was a demonic cultivator in the lower realm second only to Chu Xiu. But Chu Xiu's halo was too dazzling, and Yi Xiaonan, the 2nd strongest cultivator, was not noticed by the Daluocean cultivators. Chu Xiu shook his head. Not difficult but very scary. Chapter 1401. Previously, Tianhun had told Chu Xiu that when the major sects descended to the lower realm, they would definitely dig out some of the things they had left behind in the lower realm. But Chu Xiu had never thought that Skyfiend Palace would be so strange, and actually dug out a madman. This so-called number one demonic cultivator in an era before the great calamity of antiquity times, Chu Xiu actually did not pay much attention to him. He was just a madman who stood in that era and studied longevity, but ended up going mad. In every era, there were experts who stood at the pinnacle. It wasn't easy to stand at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens. However, unless they were like Dugu Weiwa, who could influence the future generations for hundreds of years, who wouldn't die. Let Skyfiend Palace deal with the weirdo of Skyfiend Palace themselves. Yuan Kongqing had not yet realized the seriousness of the problem. Although Yi Xiaonan was a martial artist from the lower realm, he was not like Chu Xiu, who cheated to go to the Dayu Ocean to raise his level. But it was precisely because of this that he was able to reach this step, which was even more terrifying. At this time, in Miaojiang's moon-worshipping cult, Yi Xiaonan was sitting cross-legged in the main hall. The 7-colored mist around him floated and condensed in front of him, finally turning into an identical Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan gently stretched out his hand, and the 2 Yi Xiaonans merged into one. In an instant, Yi Xiaonan's strength directly soared to the 5th heaven, and even the vitality of the entire moon-worshipping cult was completely devoured. At this time, Dong Huangtai, the high priest, and Long Ling were all present. Seeing this scene, they immediately congratulated him in unison. Congratulations, leader, for successfully refining the supreme twin life goo. Yi Xiaonan let out a long breath and waved his hand. The 7-colored mist floated away again, forming Yi Xiaonan's appearance, but his strength did not change at all. The Yi Xiaonan formed by the 7-colored mist had a somewhat dull look in his eyes. Although he looked exactly the same, he did not look like a normal person. This time, it was all thanks to Venerable Gu Yu's twin moon switching secret technique that the Saintess brought that I was able to successfully refine the supreme twin life goo. Thank your master for me. Long Linger smiled. Leader, you don't have to be so polite. My master is also very interested in moon-worshipping cult's goo techniques. The Guyu lineage has so many secret techniques, and even he has not cultivated some. He feels that he has made a profit by exchanging moon-worshipping cult's goo techniques. Yi Xiaonan nodded and suddenly said, I will seal the supreme twin life goo's refinement method and make it a taboo. No one is allowed to cultivate it. Xiaonan Tai and the other 2 revealed puzzled looks. They did not know why Xiaonan did Xiao did they. Yi Xiaonan had never been a stingy person. He was only obsessed with the martial Tao. He had never been afraid that his own disciples would catch up to him and surpass him. Therefore, the first thing Yi Xiaonan did after successfully studying the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra was to place it in the scripture pavilion for people to read. Yi Xiaonan said solemnly, the Supreme Twin Life Gu uses the 7-colored mind bewitching worm as the foundation, and gathers together to completely simulate another self. Yi Xiaonan said solemnly, the Supreme Twin Life Gu uses the 7-colored mind bewitching worm as the foundation. It gathers together to completely simulate another self and dual cultivates. It seems to have obtained a clone, and the clone can even share cultivation when fusing. But when I fused just now, I discovered that the scattered 7-colored mind bewitching worms actually faintly fused together, and gave birth to a vague and weak primordial spirit. It is simulating me, not only my body, but also my primordial spirit. If you fuse too many times, the 7-colored mind bewitching worm will definitely counterattack. In the end, it is unknown whether you fuse with the goo worm, or the goo worm fuses with you. This kind of goo worm can be used for battle, but for cultivation, the number of times you fuse with the goo worm must be strictly controlled. I have confidence, but others don't. Hearing Yi Xiaonan's words, they understood what was going on. Although moon-worshipping cult's goo technique was mystical, it was also very evil. Every goo technique actually had a great weakness and flaw. For example, the longevity goo that Long Ling had fused with had very few harmless goo worms. At this moment, the sound of an array being attacked came from outside moon-worshipping cult. Dong Huang Tai and the others were bewildered. The sects of the lower realm would not dare to attack moon-worshipping cult. Could it be that the Daluotian sects had come to attack them? Everyone hurriedly walked out of the seclusion hall and saw Supreme Heavenly Demon sitting on the demonic dragon throne with demonic chi covering the void. However, because he had been beaten up by Chu Xiu, his aura was somewhat weak and not as strong as before. Who is Yi Xiaonan? Offer your body to me, and I will guarantee you eternal life and look down on the pugilistic world in the future. Yi Xiaonan looked at Supreme Heavenly Demon silently without any change in his expression. Supreme Heavenly Demon frowned. Although the second strongest demonic cultivator in the lower realm in his memory seemed to have decent talent and body, he seemed to be a bit slow-witted and slow to react. But that didn't matter. He only wanted his body, nothing else. Just as Supreme Heavenly Demon was about to urge him, Yi Xiaonan suddenly pointed with his finger. Heaven and earth, yin and yang were separated, and the rules were destroyed and reconstructed. Heaven-mending finger. Yi Xiaonan was a man of few words. Most of the time, he liked to use actions to represent his words, just like what he was doing now. He believed that the peak of martial cultivation was eternal life. However, he only believed in the eternal life he cultivated, and not the eternal life given to him by others. Therefore, it was no longer important whether this fellow who had suddenly appeared was from the lower realm, or the Daluo Celestial, and whether what he said was true or false. If he didn't want to hand over his body, then he could only fight. Under the heaven-mending finger, the demonic chi and black fog were all torn apart. The rules were destroyed, and the attack was directed at Supreme Heavenly Demon. Although Yi Xiaonan had just reached the 5th layer of martial immortal, and his power was inferior to Chu Xiu's, it was enough for him to beat up Supreme Heavenly Demon. Supreme Heavenly Demon was caught off guard by Yi Xiaonan's sudden attack. His body was pressed into the ground by the heaven-mending finger. After his primordial spirit was reconstructed, Supreme Heavenly Demon's expression became completely malevolent. It was one thing for him to be sealed by the entire pugilistic world over 10,000 years ago. After all, the ones who did it were all peak experts of the pugilistic world. But now, 2 juniors were able to humiliate him like this. It was simply a humiliation. All of you die. Supreme Heavenly Demon roared furiously. Boundless demonic chi was pulled, turning into a myriad of demonic shadows that charged at Yi Xiaonan with terrifying might. However, Yi Xiaonan calmly formed hand seals again. In an instant, the world turned upside down, and the rules were completely distorted. Heaven-mending seal. Countless demonic shadows were annihilated by the powerful might of the heaven-mending seal. Immediately, Supreme Heavenly Demon was suppressed again. Half of Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit began to burn, while the other half used the power to break free from the heaven-mending seal. Like an arrow, it shot towards Yi Xiaonan, wanting to attack his primordial spirit. However, Yi Xiaonan stood there without moving, allowing the primordial spirit arrow to pierce through him. After all, Supreme Heavenly Demon was once in existence of the 9th heavenly layer. Although he was a bit crazy, he still had combat experience. He instantly sensed that something was amiss. Yi Xiaonan's body shattered into 7-colored mist, and another Yi Xiaonan suddenly appeared behind him. Yi Xiaonan unleashed the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra to its limits, forbidding all power of rules, and once again pressed him into the ground. At the same time, the 7-colored mist condensed into another Yi Xiaonan. The 2 Yi Xiaonans pressed down on Supreme Heavenly Demon and started beating him up. When Yuan Kongqing arrived at the moon-worshipping church, that was what he saw. Now, Yuan Kongqing was starting to doubt himself. Did he dig up the wrong person? The ancient experts that were dug up were all supreme beings with boundless magic power. They set off waves in the Jianghu. Even if they attracted a group of experts to seal them, they would only be a legend in the Jianghu, wouldn't they? But what about this one? As soon as he came out, he nervously tried to find someone to possess. In the end, he was beaten up twice, and his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Now, Yuan Kongqing felt that he could hang him up and beat him up. Imperceptibly, Yuan Kongqing's image of Supreme Heavenly Demon had almost fallen to the bottom of the valley. However, it didn't matter. Anyway, Yuan Kongqing didn't want the other party's strength. He just wanted the other party to help Sui Qiuliang out of his current predicament. Therefore, Yuan Kongqing wasn't too anxious. He even waited for a while before standing up and shouting, "Sect leader Yi, please wait a moment. This is a misunderstanding." Seeing Yuan Kongqing coming, Yi Xiaonan's main body stopped, but his clone was still beating up Supreme Heavenly Demon. Yuan Kongqing could more directly feel the misery of Supreme Heavenly Demon, and the power that Yi Xiaonan displayed now. He hurriedly said, "This is a senior of my Sky Demon Palace who was sealed 10,000 years ago. He has just been released from the seal, so he has some mental problems. I hope sect leader Yi can forgive him." "So he's not an enemy of my moon-worshipping cult?" Yuan Kongqing hurriedly shook his head and said, "No, of course not." Yuan Kongqing also felt a little afraid of moon-worshipping cult. No wonder Chu Xiu valued it so much. It was a miracle that a sect from the lower realm could grow an expert of Yi Xiaonan's level, but it was also a very scary thing. Yi Xiaonan stared at Yuan Kongqing for a long time. Finally, with a wave of his hand, the clone also turned into a 7-colored cloud and returned to his body. This time, Supreme Heavenly Demon finally didn't continue to clamor about possessing someone. The power that he had absorbed from the Sky Demon Palace Array Masters had been completely exhausted after being beaten up twice. He didn't want to return to the state of being sealed again, so he could only leave with Yuan Kongqing dejectedly. On the way, Supreme Heavenly Demon was still complaining. "Your Sky Demon Palace is really getting worse with each generation. And the Demon Path martial artists in the lower realm, have they really not heard of this lord's name?" Yuan Kongqing had no choice but to say perfunctorily, "Lord Heavenly Demon, it's been 10,000 years. It's normal for people in the pugilistic world not to remember your name. But don't worry, as long as you can help my Sky Demon Palace solve the current problem, I will definitely help you find a suitable body to possess, so that you can return to your peak as soon as possible." Just as Yuan Kongqing was perfunctorily answering Supreme Heavenly Demon, he didn't expect that because he had dug out Supreme Heavenly Demon, he had also dug out a lot of things from Eastern Qi, including the original Divine Palace that Chu Xiu had been looking for. Chapter 1402. Although the upper mortal world and the lower mortal world overlapped, there were some deviations in some locations. For example, Tianhun had told Chu Xiu that the location of the original Divine Palace should be in the Central Plains, but it turned out to be in the East Sea County, which was similar to the location where the Supreme Heavenly Demon was dug out by the Heavenly Devil Palace. Moreover, it was not discovered by the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, but by Pak Donglai of the East Sea Alliance and Hua Yingqi of the Hua family. Chu Xiu not only told the Eastern Qi Imperial Court about the search for the original Divine Palace, but also asked the other forces under his command to participate in the search. After all, one more person meant one more chance. Pak Donglai and Hua Yingqi listened to Chu Xiu and wanted to participate in the fight for the power of the Central Plains warriors, so they invaded the East Sea County with their people. They heard that the Heavenly Devil Palace seemed to have dug up something amazing here, so they thought they were smart enough to dig up something here. As a result, they were really lucky and dug up something. After receiving the news, Chu Xiu did not rush over. Instead, he went to the northern Yan and West Chu to bring Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghe, who had already broken through in seclusion. Then he went to the southern Man branch of the Kunlun Devil cult to bring a group of people. Only then did he prepare to set out. According to Tianhun, the original Divine Palace was a group of lunatics. The things they left behind were very powerful and useful to him, but it also represented a certain degree of danger. Therefore, it was better to bring a group of people to be safe. Chu Xiu also realized that before the great ancient calamity, this group of cultivators had been rather restless. Perhaps they had been living too comfortably. After they stood at the peak, they always wanted to mess around with some strange things. For example, the ancestors of the blissful Devil Palace had wanted to restore the ancient demon god, but they had completely strayed from the path of creation. There was also the supreme heavenly demon that was dug out by the Heavenly Demon Palace. It seemed like he had studied the secret art of longevity to the point that he had developed a problem with his spirit. No one knew which faction Chu Xiu belonged to in the original God Palace. However, he was even more ambitious. He wanted to create a god with the power of a human. He was simply a bunch of lunatics. Before the great ancient calamity, it was also a flourishing age of martial arts. It was a flourishing age of geniuses and madmen. After everyone gathered, Chu Xiu told them about the situation and took them to Donghai County. At the same time, Chu Xiu tossed a book to Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghe and said, "Old Lu, City Master Shang, these are some experiences for martial immortals to adapt to the power of regulations from the first to the third heavenly layer. It will allow you to cross the first 3 heavenly layers with the fastest speed possible." Of course, this thing was not written by Chu Xiu. He broke through the first 3 stages by cheating, and that kind of experience was not suitable for others. It was taken from the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Only these 2 sects would produce martial immortals every generation, so they could summarize such detailed experiences that were suitable for every martial immortal. Shang Tianliang took it inside. "I can't thank you enough for your kindness. This old man will definitely work for Cult Master Chu for the rest of his life. However, I didn't expect that this old man would be able to step into this legendary realm one day." Of course, Lu Jianghe would not be as sentimental as Shang Tianliang. Instead, he leaned over and asked, "Cult Master Chu, I have reached the martial immortal realm. Have you thought about when you should confer titles to the 4 great demon venerables?" Chu Xiu was a little surprised and said, "Your current strength is even stronger than the 4 great demon venerables in the past. Why do you still care about a reputation?" Lu Jianghe shook his head and said in a deep tone, "This is obsession, you don't understand. It's been 500 years, and things have remained the same, but people have changed. I didn't cultivate hard to prove anything. I just want to take back the position of demon venerables that I once lost." "Then take your time to be obsessed with it." After saying that, Chu Xiu ignored the sentimental Lu Jianghe and directly ordered his people to go to East Sea Prefecture. At this time, on the coast of East Sea Prefecture, waves were beating against the shore, and dark clouds were roaring as if a storm was passing through. But in fact, the East Sea Prefecture was calm at this time of the year. The reason for this was the confrontation between 2 groups of people. The powerful momentum affected the power of heaven and earth, creating such a scene. On one side of the confrontation were the East Sea warriors represented by Pak Donglai and Huangqi. They had been hostile before, but now that they were preparing to enter the Central Plains warriors to develop, they united as if they were not the ones who had been vile before. Standing in front of Pak Donglai and Huangqi were the warriors of the Great Light Temple led by Su Yun, and some of the warriors of the Heavenly Luo Temple. It was simple. After Pak Donglai and Huangqi found the clues about the original God Palace, they sent a message to Chu Xiu. They were quite honest. When they heard Chu Xiu say that they were not allowed to enter, they kept guarding outside. But at this time, Su Yun suddenly led a group of monks here, also eyeing the place where they had found the clues about the original God Palace. But they were not here for the original God Palace, and the East Sea warriors would never leak the secret. Su Yun kept saying that there were relics of the Buddhist sect here, and wanted them to give way. Naturally, the East Sea warriors would not give way, so the 2 sides were in a stalemate. Su Yun looked at Bai Donglai and Huangqi before him and said in a deep voice, "The 2 of you, this poor monk is not deliberately making things difficult for the 2 of you. However, there really are remnants of my Buddhist sect here. As far as I know, none of you in the East Sea cultivates Buddhist sect techniques. In that case, why don't you give up this place? Give it to the Buddhist sect. The Great Light Temple, the Heavenly Luo Temple will owe you a favor." At that moment, Rama was still in seclusion in the Heavenly Luo Temple. In Su Yun's current state, he needed an opportunity to become a martial immortal, not to cultivate hard. Hence, he had brought people to search for the relics of the Buddhist sect. Moreover, the Heavenly Luo Temple wanted to familiarize itself with the warriors who had joined later. Hence, it had specially placed a portion of the Heavenly Luo Temple's warriors under Su Yun. Pak Donglai said coldly, "Master Su Yun, you have to be reasonable. We found this place first. Regardless of whether there are Buddhist sect relics here, if we don't want to give it up, Do you still want to snatch it? Is this how the heavenly Luo Temple, the #1 Buddhist sect Holy Land, acts? In fact, the warriors of Donghai did not know much about the martial arts world of the Central Plains. It was Chu Xiu who had given them detailed information. However, they still had a way to deal with the Buddhist sect warriors. The simplest way was to use reason and righteousness to suppress them. Didn't the Buddhist sect boast about being open and above board? In that case, they shouldn't be able to take things by force, right? Su Yun suddenly chuckled, but his voice immediately turned cold. Of course, the heavenly Luo Temple won't snatch it, but I will. If you stop the Buddhist sect from taking back what belongs to you, you will be making an enemy of the Buddhist sect. You must know that even the Buddhist sect has the wrath of a guardian deity. Today, even if the entire Jianghu says that the Buddhist sect is taking things by force, I will bear this crime myself. I will not implicate the heavenly Luo Temple. Ever since the Great Light Temple had been destroyed by Chu Xiu, Su Yun's personality seemed to have changed into a different person. If it were before, Su Yun would have used gentler methods to solve the problem. However, Su Yun could not be bothered to think so much. What reputation did a person whose sect had been destroyed need? He, Su Yun, no longer had a reputation. So he would simply and crudely snatch it. This was the first time he had done something for the heavenly Luo Temple. He would rather bear the reputation of being overbearing and unreasonable than bear the reputation of being incompetent. Pak Donglai and Hua Yingqi looked at each other. Their eyes revealed the same thought. They could not defeat him. Although they did not recognize Su Yun before, based on the cultivation that Su Yun displayed, which was infinitely close to the half-step martial immortal realm, they knew that they could not defeat him by force. Hua Yingqi said in a deep voice, "Master Su Yun, even if the heavenly Luo Temple does not care about its reputation, is it not afraid of strong enemies? Do you know who we are working for now? We are working for the Kunlun Devil cult's official Chu Xiu. The overseas Jianghu's existence in the lower realm had always been extremely low. Over the years, they had always been in a small circle and played with each other. So apart from themselves, no one else in the Central Plains warriors knew that they were relying on Chu Xiu. Hua Yingqi thought that by revealing Chu Xiu's name, he would make Su Yun retreat. However, he did not expect Su Yun's domineering expression to turn into murderous intent. It was an extremely dense murderous intent. 9-layered domains unfolded and boundless Buddhist light bloomed. Without saying anything, Su Yun attacked Hua Yingqi, Pak Donglai, and the other overseas Jianghu warriors. Kill! At the same time, Su Yun also shouted. The Buddhist disciples under him also attacked the overseas Jianghu warriors. Hua Yingqi and Pak Donglai did not expect that the other side would directly attack Chu Xiu when Chu Xiu was mentioned. In terms of strength, this group of overseas Jianghu warriors was naturally no match for the elites of the Great Light Temple and the Heavenly Luo Temple. They were almost forced to retreat step by step, which was extremely miserable. Su Yun's face was full of murderous intent. For him now, Chu Xiu had become his obsession. Anyone and anything related to Chu Xiu could arouse his murderous intent. This group of guys dared to rely on Chu Xiu, so they deserved to be killed. When Chu Xiu came to the edge of Donghai County with his people, he saw this scene. Sensing Chu Xiu's arrival, Su Yun immediately retreated with his people. He looked at Chu Xiu with vigilance, and at the same time, he activated the array disc in his arms. When Hua Yingqi saw Chu Xiu coming, he immediately rushed over and began to loudly cry for help. Sect Master, this group of bald donkeys wants to drive us out. We discovered this place first, but this group of bald donkeys just robbed us. We brought up Cult Master Chu, but they didn't give us any face and killed even more fiercely. Chu Xiu waved his hand and interrupted Hua Yingqi's cry of innocence. He looked at Su Yun with a faint smile and said lightly, "Master Su Yun, since the Great Light Temple has joined the Heavenly Luo Temple and returned to the Buddhist ancestral land, you should have a brighter future. But now, why do you have to go against me? You're courting death." When he shouted the last word, the whole world seemed to stand still in an instant. The waves on the coast instantly exploded, as if the sea had been cut off, revealing a large area of land buried deep under the coast. This power was many times stronger than when the two groups of people fought. In an instant, everyone on both sides was shocked. Chapter 1403. The Great Light Temple, or rather, the people from the Heavenly Luo Temple, had actually appeared here. This surprised Chu Xiu. The original Divine Palace was not part of the three branches of Taoism, Buddhism, or Demon. To be more precise, it was closer to the Taoism and Demon paths. It had nothing to do with the Buddhist sect. What were they doing here? Su Yin said in a deep voice. Chu Xiu, the martial world is so big. It's not your place alone. Why can you come here and we can't? Chu Xiu shook his head lightly and said, Master Su Yin, you seem to have made a mistake. You are no longer the Great Light Temple's Wangyan Zen Hall's chief, and the Kunlun Devil cult is no longer the half-dead Kunlun Devil cult of the past. There is a huge difference between a martial immortal and a non-martial immortal. Do you think I still need to reason with you? Last time, the Heavenly Luo Temple's Zen Master Ji Kong came here and used Dugu Weiwei's blood essence to exchange for your two factions' residences. He also gave you a chance to live. Now you insist on coming to me. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? When he shouted the last word, the chilling murderous intent affected the rules of the entire world. It turned into a raging dragon and surged towards Su Yin. Previously, Chu Xiu had clearly become a martial immortal, but he did not kill the Great Light Temple. It was not because he was benevolent, nor was it because Chu Xiu was indecisive. It was because there was no need to. There were countless people in the world who hated him, and even more people who wanted to kill him. If he had to kill them one by one, wouldn't Chu Xiu die of exhaustion? The existences that could be taken seriously by the current Chu Xiu were the hierarch and temple master of the Sanskrit sect, the revered one of the Heavenly Luo Temple, and Zen Master Ji Shan. Facing these people, Chu Xiu would use all his energy to deal with them. To put it bluntly, Su Yin and even the reborn Rama were no longer qualified to be his opponents. For such existences, Chu Xiu would not touch them before they provoked him. He was also too lazy to do so. However, if they really provoked him and blocked his path, Chu Xiu would definitely not tolerate it. Right at this moment, a Buddhist light suddenly descended and blocked Chu Xiu's imposing attack. The head of the Earth Treasury, Ji Kong, Fajing, and several martial immortals from the Heavenly Luo Temple descended together. Cult Master Chu is now the master of the Eastern region, and he's a martial immortal at the fifth heaven. For him to attack a martial immortal who's not even a martial immortal, that's a bit unreasonable. Chu Xiu said indifferently, Venerable Su Yin was my senior in the past. In the martial Tao, those who have reached the pinnacle come first. The weak are not in the right. Master Jikong, what do you mean by this? No matter how much hatred I, Chu Xiu, attract, there's no need for me to be targeted by the Heavenly Luo Temple, right? I've just found a relic here, and you want to rob it? Could it be that the Heavenly Luo Temple is really prepared to fight to the death with the Kunlun Devil cult? Jikong was taken aback. Rob your relic. This is clearly the 10,000 Buddha temple left behind by the ancestors of the Buddhist sect. Although Cult Master Chu is proficient in Buddhist sect techniques, you're not a member of the Buddhist sect. Strictly speaking, you're the one who robbed the Heavenly Luo Temple's relic. Chu Xiu looked at Pak Donglai and Huangqi with a puzzled expression. If these two found the wrong place, it would be a joke. Although Chu Xiu didn't know what kind of place the 10,000 Buddha temple was, it definitely wouldn't be as helpful to him as the original God Palace. Otherwise, Tianhun wouldn't have asked him to dig up the original God Palace. Upon seeing this, Pak Donglai said hurriedly, Official Chu, we're definitely not mistaken. We dug up the stone tablet with the original God Palace's mark here. Zen Master Jikong frowned and said, The Heavenly Luo Temple's deduction can't be wrong. The 10,000 Buddha temple is here because the chief of the Heavenly Luo Temple's Tianmu Pavilion used the relic of the 10,000 Buddha temple as a guide. He spent 10 years of his lifespan to deduce this. It can't be wrong. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll know once we dig it out. Chu Xiu used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. With a punch, an earth dragon flipped over, and the entire coast was smashed by Chu Xiu. Endless waves flowed back into the sea, looking very mysterious. Zen Master Jikong frowned slightly when he saw Chu Xiu's simple and crude action. However, he didn't say anything. As Chu Xiu's punch landed, something really emerged from the coast that was originally covered by seawater. It was a huge ball of light. One side was pale green, while the other side was glowing with golden Buddha light. Through the ball of light, one could vaguely see various pavilions and terraces. It was obviously an independent space. At the sight of this, everyone present instantly understood what was going on. Pak Donglai and Huangqi didn't find the wrong place. Similarly, the Heavenly Luo Temple's deduction wasn't wrong either. The original God Palace and the 10,000 Buddha Temple were both here. However, when the upper mortal world and lower mortal world merged, some changes happened to them. The two independent spaces, which might have been closer to each other, actually shifted when they merged. They started to overlap and eventually, the two ruins merged together. This was interesting. The original God Palace and the 10,000 Buddha Temple's secret realms merged together. Who knew what would happen to the things inside? If it had been the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Heavenly Luo Temple in the past, they might have teamed up to explore after discussing the conditions. However, it was obvious that it was impossible now. Therefore, at this moment, both sides were ready to fight, and were ready to fight to decide the ownership of the secret realms. Zen Master Jikong said in a deep voice, "Cult Master Chu, are you really not going to give it to us? The 10,000 Buddha Temple is very important to the Heavenly Luo Temple. If you give it to us, the Heavenly Luo Temple will definitely reward you generously." Chu Xiu said slowly, "I can give it to you, but the problem is, do you have what I want? Do you have another 100 or 80 drops of Dugu Weiwei's essence blood? Or the origin? Can the Heavenly Luo Temple produce it?" Zen Master Jikong frowned and said, "Cult Master Chu, you are making things difficult for us. The Heavenly Luo Temple has already given away its essence blood. Moreover, the origin is an extremely precious existence. How can the Heavenly Luo Temple have it? On the contrary, if I'm not wrong, Cult Master Chu, you should have one origin. If one isn't enough, do you want a second one?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "No one will complain about having too many good things. Since the Heavenly Luo Temple can't give me what I want, and I don't want to give it to you, things are much simpler. Martial artists still have to rely on their strength to determine the winner. Let's just fight." As he said that, Chu Xiu's hand was already on the broken array formation at his waist. Zen Master Jikong frowned when he saw this. The Heavenly Luo Temple wasn't afraid of fighting, but it didn't want to engage in a meaningless battle. Chu Xiu's way of doing things was simple and crude, but he didn't want to fight here. Besides, he might not be able to win. He had witnessed Chu Xiu's strength in the gamble last time. Chu Xiu wasn't at a disadvantage when fighting against martial artists at the second, or even the third heavenly layer. Hold on. Chu Xiu looked at Zen Master Jikong and said, "Oh, Master Jikong, are you going to give it to me?" Zen Master Jikong shook his head and said, "Of course not. The Myriad Buddha Palace is very important to the Heavenly Luo Temple. We will definitely not give it to you. But at the same time, this remnant is also very important to Cult Master Chu. So you won't give it to me. Since no one wants to give it to you, it wouldn't be worth it if we were to fight for real. Why don't we both make a bet? We'll send our disciples below the third heavenly layer of martial immortal, no more than 10 of them, to enter and fight for it. Victory or defeat doesn't depend on us, but on our disciples. If one side is in danger, you and I can also save them. However, the side that makes a move first will be considered to have lost, and will have to retreat. What do you think, Cult Master Chu?" Chu Xiu had a faint smile on his face. "Master Jikong, as an eminent monk of the Buddhist sect, you like to gamble so much? You gambled last time, and you're going to gamble this time?" Zen Master Jikong shook his head and said, "That's why I can't become a Buddha. A little gambling is fun. Gambling once in a while can avoid some losses. Isn't that good? Does Cult Master Chu dare to make this bet?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Why wouldn't I dare?" With a smile on his face, Zen Master Jikong immediately ordered several first and second heavenly layer of martial immortals from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple, as well as several arcane understanding realm cultivators, including Su Yun, to step forward. Previously, When he fought against Chu Xiu, he wasn't able to defeat Chu Xiu. He admitted that Chu Xiu's battle prowess was indeed shocking. It was no wonder such a person could stir up a storm in the entire Daoyu Ocean and lower realms. However, while he admitted that Chu Xiu was strong, he didn't believe that the Kunlun devil cult could be as strong as him. For a sect like the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple, its disciples were all nurtured generation after generation. Practically every generation had a few outstanding cultivators. It could be said that none of the cultivators from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple were weak. All of their disciples were above the same level, let alone martial immortals. Therefore Zen Master Jikong was very confident in this bet. Chu Xiu said to Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian, "City Master Shang, Brother Lu, I'll leave it to you." Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian nodded calmly. Lu Jianghe, who had stepped into the martial immortal realm, couldn't help but ask, "What about me?" Chu Xiu glanced at him and said, "Don't embarrass yourself." Lu Jianghe's eyes widened. He felt that Chu Xiu was targeting him. Shang Tianliang and Lu Fengxian were left to them. "Why must I embarrass myself?" Before Lu Jianghe could refute, the people from the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple had already stepped forward. They also stepped forward and both sides entered the space. A white light flashed. When Lu Fengxian and the others stepped into the space, distorted palaces appeared in front of them. Some of them had even been completely torn apart and piled up together, becoming ruins. These palaces were obviously of two different styles. The 10,000 Buddha Temple and the Divine Origin Palace had completely overlapped. Lu Fengxian asked Shang Tianliang and Lu Jianghe, "City Master Shang, Senior Lu, should we explore first or make a move first?" Before Shang Tianliang could speak, Lu Jianghe stood up and sneered. "Explore? Explore my ass. Let's get rid of these bald donkeys first. After that, we can explore however we want." You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.